A mom was being harassed on a plane until the quiet stranger next to her spoke 6 words that shut everything down. Danielle Brooks had no intention of becoming the center of attention that morning. She just wanted to make it through the flight. Nothing fancy, no drama, just her 2 kids, and a few hours in the sky between Boise and Charlotte. She stood near gate B12 at the Salt Lake City airport, bouncing her 9-month-old daughter on her hip while her son Caleb fiddled with the zipper on his backpack. The gate agent had already made 3 announcements, and still, boarding hadn't started. Danielle felt the sweat starting to gather along her hairline, not because of nerves, but because she knew exactly how this was going to go. It wasn't the first time she flew solo with the kids, but every time she did, it felt like a gamble. She knew the stares she'd get, the audible sighs when she walked down the aisle, and the glances when her baby cried. People didn't always say something, but they didn't have to. Finally, the line moved. Group 4. That was them. She adjusted the car seat strapped over her shoulder, held Caleb's hand tight, and steered the stroller down the jet bridge like it was a race she never asked to run. They were in row 17, middle and window seats. Danielle gave Caleb the window. That part was easy. The harder part was keeping everything and everyone calm. She maneuvered her bags quickly, apologizing to the aisle passenger who hadn't even looked up from his tablet. He wore a pressed dress shirt, no tie, and had the kind of energy that let her know he didn't want conversation. That was fine. She didn't either. With the baby finally dozing off and Caleb munching quietly on crackers, Danielle exhaled. It was a short exhale, the kind of breath you take when you know it won't last. 10 minutes later, she heard it, a loud, deliberate sigh from behind her. She didn't turn around. At first, she thought maybe she'd leaned her seat back too far, or maybe Caleb had accidentally bumped the tray behind him. But then came the second sigh, louder. Danielle glanced sideways at the man next to her, still focused on his screen. No help there. She adjusted the baby's blanket, tried to focus on the flight attendants doing their safety routine. The baby stirred. Caleb asked if he could watch a show on her phone. The voice behind her cut in. "Could you not recline all the way? Some of us don't have room to stretch like that." His voice was low, sharp, and already carried a note of blame. Danielle didn't look back. She pulled the seat up slightly and mumbled, "Sorry." That should have been it. But she felt the tension, like the way a rubber band feels right before it snaps. Something was coming. Danielle hadn't even opened her water bottle when it started again. The man behind her let out another sigh, louder this time, followed by a scoff. Then came the sound of him shifting, aggressively, in his seat. His knees pushed into the back of hers, deliberate. Not hard enough to complain to the flight crew, but just enough to send a message. Danielle leaned slightly to her right and whispered to Caleb, "Sit still, baby. Don't turn around, okay?" "Okay," he said softly, already sensing something was off. But kids are kids. 2 minutes later, Caleb tugged gently on the corner of her sleeve. "Mommy, what's that thing for?" he asked, pointing toward the emergency card in the seat pocket in front of him. He was just curious, asking a question like any kid would, but when he turned slightly in his seat, trying to get a better look at the back of the card, his elbow must have bumped the armrest of the man behind them. The response came instantly. "Seriously?" the man snapped, his voice cutting through the low murmur of the cabin. "Control your kid. I don't need to be part of your parenting today." Danielle froze. Her mouth opened for a moment, but nothing came out. A few nearby heads turned. The woman across the aisle peeked over, then looked away quickly like she hadn't seen anything. Danielle gathered herself and turned halfway around, speaking quietly. "I'm sorry. He didn't mean to bump you." The man didn't care. "That's not the point. You people come on planes like it's your living room. Some of us paid good money to not be kicked in the back for 3 hours." Her stomach dropped. She looked forward again, holding Caleb a little closer. She wanted to disappear into the seat, to just blink and be off the plane. But she couldn't. She was still strapped in at 30,000 feet, with her baby asleep against her chest, and her son now staring at the seat in front of him like he was afraid to move. The man behind her kept muttering, not loud enough to alert a flight attendant, but loud enough that she could hear every word. "Unbelievable. Kids everywhere. No respect for other people." Danielle's cheeks burned. She didn't know whether to cry or scream. And the man next to her, still glued to his tablet like none of it was happening. Her heart pounded harder. She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want her kids to remember this flight for the wrong reasons, but she also didn't want to sit there, helpless, while someone treated her like she didn't belong. Caleb tugged her sleeve again. "Did I do something bad?" he whispered. That hurt more than anything. She squeezed his hand. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong." But the quiet man beside her finally looked up, and this time he didn't look away. Something in his eyes had changed. The man beside her finally set down his tablet. No dramatic gestures, no sighs or shaking heads, just a calm, deliberate motion, like someone who'd seen 1,000 things worse, and this one had finally earned his attention. Danielle noticed it immediately. He looked over at her first, not the man behind them, and there was something steady in his expression, not pity, not annoyance, just presence, like someone who was finally ready to be part of the moment. "You all right?" he asked. His voice was low but clear, measured, not loud enough for the whole row, just loud enough for her. Danielle hesitated. Her instinct was to say, "I'm fine," and move on, like always. But Caleb was watching. So was the baby, even in sleep. Her tiny hands still curled around Danielle's necklace like she didn't want to let go. She nodded slowly. "It's just been a long day." The man gave a small nod in return. Then he turned his head, slowly, and spoke directly to the passenger behind them. "Sir," he said, "I think that's enough." Silence. The other man seemed caught off guard. "Excuse me?" he replied. "You've made your point," the man next to Danielle said evenly. "She's got 2 kids and a full row of strangers to deal with. She doesn't need you making it harder." The man behind them chuckled sarcastically. "You have any idea what it's like to have someone's kid kicking your seat the whole flight?" "I do," the other man said, "because I've had it happen. And when it does, I either ignore it or I politely ask the parent. What I don't do is humiliate someone in front of their children." The tension in the air shifted. Heads were turning now. A couple rows up, someone paused their movie. Across the aisle, a woman stopped flipping through her magazine. The man behind them huffed. "I'm not humiliating anyone. I'm just asking for basic respect." "No, you're not," came the reply. "You're picking on someone because you think nobody's going to say anything about it." "Well, here I am." The other man said nothing, just let out another frustrated exhale and leaned back hard into his seat. Danielle stared ahead, stunned. Her mouth felt dry. Her heart was racing, but this time not from panic, from something else, something like relief. She turned slightly toward the man beside her. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded once. Some people just need to be reminded. The baby shifted against her chest. Caleb was staring up at the man, his eyes wide. "Are you a coach or something?" Caleb asked, breaking the silence. The man smiled gently. "Nope, not a coach." Caleb squinted. "You sound like my teacher when someone's in trouble." The man gave a short chuckle. "Let's just say I've dealt with enough trouble to know what it looks like." Danielle laughed quietly for the first time that day. Not a big laugh, but a real one. She didn't know his name. She didn't know where he was headed or what he did for a living. But for a moment, it didn't matter. Someone had seen her trying, and had stepped in, not with anger, not with a lecture, but with calm, quiet strength. But the flight was far from over, and the man behind them wasn't finished just yet. The man behind them fell quiet for a while, but it was the kind of silence that felt sharp, not peace, just waiting. Danielle tried to settle back in. She shifted the baby's blanket, pulled out Caleb's headphones, and tapped on her phone, opening a cartoon for him. She hoped the quiet would hold, but 10 minutes later, the kicking started. This time, not from Caleb. The man behind them had stretched out, and now his knees were back against Danielle's seat. Tap, tap, a slow push. She adjusted forward, trying not to react, but then he muttered, just loud enough, "Maybe she'll get the hint this time." Danielle stiffened. The man beside her sat up fully now. He looked straight ahead, spoke calmly again, but this time louder. "Sir, I already asked you once. Don't make this into something it doesn't need to be." The tension in row 17 was back like a weight pressing down on the cabin. A few passengers glanced over their shoulders. No flight attendant had come yet. They were mid-service, handing out plastic cups and tiny pretzels 2 rows up. Danielle looked toward the aisle. She considered calling for help, but that would mean asking. That would mean being seen again, center of attention again. The man beside her looked over. "You shouldn't have to deal with this," he said. His voice was firm now, like steel with a velvet cover. She finally asked, "Can I just switch seats with you?" He shook his head gently. "No need. He's the one who needs to move, not you." Then he raised his hand, motioning subtly to the attendant walking by. When she approached, he didn't yell or complain. He simply asked, "Can you speak with the gentleman behind us? He's been kicking her seat and making repeated comments. It's becoming hostile." Danielle watched as the flight attendant's smile faded. She nodded, said she'd be back in a moment. The man behind them shifted again. "Oh, what now?" he groaned. "Now," the man next to her replied, "you stop treating people like garbage and mind your own seat." The way he said it, measured, level, didn't match the intensity of the moment. And yet, somehow, that made it hit harder. The baby stirred in Danielle's arms, her tiny head pressing against her chest. Danielle rocked her gently. Caleb had taken off his headphones, holding them in his lap, waiting. "What's your name?" Danielle asked quietly. The man paused, then extended his hand. "Travis Greer," he said. She shook it. "Danielle." "Nice to meet you, Danielle," he said. "Sorry it had to be like this." She smiled, tired but genuine. "Me too." The flight attendant returned moments later, crouched slightly at the man's row behind them. Danielle couldn't hear what was said, but she saw the look, the tight-lipped expression of someone being told to stop or else. For the rest of the flight, the man behind them said nothing. No kicking, no muttering, just silence. Danielle let out the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The baby stayed asleep. Caleb leaned against her side, comforted, and Travis went back to reading like none of it had ever happened. But Danielle had a feeling this man was more than just someone who stood up for her, and she was about to find out. The flight had calmed down on the surface, but Danielle's nerves hadn't. She kept replaying it in her head. The comments, the tone, the way her son looked at her when he asked if he'd done something wrong. It sat on her chest like extra carry-on, but every time she started to spiral, her eyes drifted to the man next to her. Travis. Calm, focused, steady. Who was this guy? It wasn't just how he spoke, it was the way he handled it all. No fear, no showing off. Like he'd been trained to stay composed under pressure. Caleb tugged her sleeve. "Is he a policeman?" he whispered, wide-eyed. Danielle smiled. "I don't know, sweetie." She turned to Travis. "My son thinks you're some kind of superhero." Travis chuckled. "I used to wear a uniform, if that counts." "You retired?" she asked. He hesitated. "Still in, Air Force." Her eyes widened. "Seriously?" He nodded. "Heading back home for a few days. Got out of a briefing in El Paso late last night." Danielle blinked. "You just sat through national security and then ended up stuck next to me and a fussy baby?" He smiled. "I've seen more chaos in a tent in Afghanistan. This is peace and quiet." She laughed, genuinely. Loud enough that the woman across the aisle turned and smiled back. Travis leaned in slightly. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "You held your ground, and that matters. Most people, they fold. They start apologizing for things they didn't even do. But you stayed calm, and you protected your kids." Danielle's throat tightened. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and turned his attention back to the seat in front of him. But just as Danielle started to settle, the plane jolted. A sharp dip. A few overhead bins rattled. Drinks clinked in plastic cups. Turbulence. Caleb grabbed her arm. "Mom?" "It's okay, baby." The fasten seatbelt sign lit up with a ding, and the captain's voice crackled over the speaker. "Folks, we've hit a bit of rough air. Should pass soon. Flight attendants, please take your seats." Danielle held on tighter. The baby stirred. Caleb leaned against her chest now, clutching his seatbelt. She hated flying, always had. Not because of heights, but because once you were in that cabin, you were stuck. No pause button, no pulling over. The plane jerked again. A few passengers gasped. Travis? Still calm, hands resting on his knees, eyes forward. "You okay?" he asked. Danielle tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. "I don't like the whole falling through the sky thing," he smiled. "You're not falling. This plane's built for this. Turbulence feels big, but it's normal, like hitting potholes in the air." She nodded slowly, breathing deeper. Travis leaned closer. You're not alone. You got through worse than this today. It wasn't just a line. It landed differently. The baby shifted again, opened her eyes, let out a whimper. Danielle rocked gently. Caleb closed his eyes, whispering, "It's almost over. Almost over." And finally the plane steadied. No more dips. No more bumps. Just that smooth forward glide. The cabin relaxed again. People untensed. Conversations resumed, and Danielle let her head fall back gently against the seat. "Thank you," she said again, quieter this time. But the landing was coming soon, and with it something Danielle never expected to hear. The wheels touched down on the tarmac in Charlotte with a soft thump, followed by that familiar screech of brakes and a collective exhale from the cabin. Danielle hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath. Caleb looked out the window, grinning. "We made it!" Danielle smiled and brushed his hair back. The baby, still in her arms, blinked slowly and yawned. People were already standing, even though the seatbelt sign was still on. The man behind them unbuckled quickly, grabbing for the overhead bin with more force than necessary. He didn't say a word, no glance, no apology. He was just done with it. Danielle was fine with that. Let him disappear. She waited until most of the row had cleared before standing. Travis remained seated beside her, calm and patient as ever. She turned to him. "Thank you again. Really, I don't even know how to explain what that meant to me." "You don't have to," he said. "You already did, by being there for your kids." She hesitated, then added, "I don't know how people stay that calm under pressure." He shrugged. "Comes with practice. But honestly, I didn't step in for me. I've got a daughter, too. She's 12 now. I just kept thinking, what if she were you someday? Would I want someone to say something or just sit there and watch?" Danielle swallowed hard. "That's what this world's missing," he added. "A little courage, a little backbone. Not to fight, but just to stand up when it matters." A quiet beat passed between them. Then from a few rows back, someone tapped Danielle's shoulder. A woman, maybe mid-40s, glasses, business suit, offered a soft smile. "I just wanted to say, I saw everything, and you handled that man with more grace than I think I could have managed." Danielle blinked. "Oh, thank you." The woman looked past her, toward Travis. "And you, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but that was one of the most respectful things I've seen on a plane. You didn't humiliate him. You just made it clear what wasn't okay." Travis nodded politely. "Appreciate that." She reached down and grabbed her bag, pausing one last time. "We need more people like you two. Take care of those kids." She disappeared down the aisle. Danielle stared after her for a second, processing the words. Then she turned back to Travis. "I wish I could buy you a coffee or something," she said, half laughing, "but I've got 2 cranky passengers of my own." Travis smiled. "Rain check. Take care of yourself, Danielle." She nodded, then slowly worked her way into the aisle with the kids. As she stepped off the plane, another passenger she hadn't even noticed, a man in his 30s with a neck pillow around his shoulder, gave her a quick thumbs up. Didn't say a word, just nodded once, like he'd seen it too. The baby started to fuss, but Danielle didn't feel that weight anymore. Something in her had shifted. She didn't feel alone this time. She didn't feel small. She turned one last time as they passed through the jet bridge. Travis was still at the exit row, helping an older woman with her suitcase. Calm, steady, like always. But she didn't yet know that someone on the flight had been filming the whole interaction quietly, and it would be on the internet before her bags even hit the carousel. Danielle didn't see the video until 2 days later. She was sitting on her sister's couch in Charlotte, a bowl of reheated mac and cheese on her lap, and the baby asleep in the pack and play nearby. Caleb was building towers with plastic blocks on the floor. Her sister walked in holding her phone, eyebrows raised. "Danielle," she said, "is this you?" The clip was short, maybe 2 minutes. Shaky, like someone had filmed it on their phone from across the aisle. But there she was, mid-flight. Caleb beside her, the man behind her making a comment. And then Travis. His voice calm, his words measured. Standing up, not with force, but with presence. The moment where he turned and simply said, "Sir, that's enough." Danielle's stomach flipped. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It's all over," her sister replied. Someone posted it on TikTok. Then a teacher in Phoenix shared it on Facebook. Now it's everywhere. People are calling him the man in 17D. Danielle stared at the screen. There were thousands of comments, people praising his tone, people defending her, parents sharing their own stories of feeling judged, cornered, or ignored in public spaces. But one comment stuck with her more than the rest. It read, "Courage doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes it's just someone calmly saying, 'This isn't okay.'" That stayed with her, not just because of what happened, but because of what it revealed, about how many people had stayed silent, about how often we let things slide because it's easier than stepping in, about how loud kindness can be, even when it's spoken softly. Danielle didn't hear from Travis again. She didn't need to. He hadn't done what he did for thanks. He did it because it was right. And in doing so, he gave her kids something stronger than comfort. He gave them a memory, one where they saw a stranger stand up, not with fists or fury, but with decency. That's the kind of memory that sticks. That's the kind that teaches. If you've ever watched someone be mistreated and wondered if you should say something, you probably should. If you've ever been the person who stayed silent, don't beat yourself up. Just don't stay silent next time. And if you've ever felt like no one sees how hard you're trying, someone probably does. You just might not know it yet. Speak when it matters. Stand where it counts. That moment might seem small, but to someone else, it could mean everything. If this story moved you, share it. Pass it on. Let it remind someone else that quiet strength is still strength, and it's always welcome.